Our next speaker spent 18 years an elected representative of the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne and was recently elected as Ontario Regional Chief. Please welcome Ontario Regional Chief Abram Benedict.
Sego, good morning to all of you. It's a great pleasure to bring greetings on behalf of the Chiefs in Ontario, and thank you so much for the warm welcome this morning from our moderator. My name is Abram Benedict, and I'm the Ontario Regional Chief. And this position advocates for 133 First Nations across Ontario. And as in the introduction for myself, I spent 18 years in a community leadership role, 9 years as a member of council, and 9 years as the Grand Chief of my community, which is the Mohawk community of Akwesasne, which is a Haudenosaunee community located about an hour east of here. And as a community leader, relationships are important to me. Relationships with our neighbors, with our partners, whether they be provincial or federal government. And as the Ontario Regional Chief, that continues to be important to me. When I was as the former Grand Chief of the Mohawk community of Akwesasne, I worked closely with our municipal partners. Today, we're joined by Mayor Justin Townsdale, the City of Cornwall, members of his council, and members of the SD&G region municipality are here as well. I can tell you that working with them closely has always been extremely important. And why that is so that we bring opportunity. We bring relationships to not only the municipality in which they represent, but the First Nation in which I represent. And I can tell you that as we work through some of the projects, we jointly own a piece of property there, our community of Akwesasne in the City of Cornwall. We're working through a cleanup phase and a study phase. And what is important is that all of you as municipal leaders, people that provide services to your communities, seize upon the opportunity to create relationships with the First Nation communities in which are around you. You may have varying degrees of that relationship. I can tell you that in Cornwall, we have MP Eric Duncan, a newly appointed Minister of College and Universities, Nolan Quinn, former Mayor, Senator Benedict Clement, and myself, the Ontario Regional Chief, all hail from that region. And if it weren't for the partnerships and the understanding between mutual and respect that I have with each of those individuals, I'm not sure that I'd be standing here today talking to you about how important it is to create relationships and forge that with your First Nation partners across this region. And as AMO, the organization which all of you are part of or support or work with, is an organization that represents 444 municipalities across Ontario. There are 133 First Nations across Ontario. And I wonder how many of you know the name of that First Nation next to you, know the name of the chief, have a working relationship with them. I can tell you that if you don't, now is the time to continue to work upon that. And as the Ontario Regional Chief, my office, the Chiefs of Ontario, is here to continue to support that. Because I can tell you that you've heard this morning in the remarks some of the important things, the challenges that are facing the City of Ottawa, the challenges that you face as municipal leaders, as service providers in your communities. The challenges in our communities are the same. But many of those challenges, like housing and addictions, jobs, were challenges before. And now, with the rising cost of living, the shortage of homes, those challenges in our communities are much greater. And this is when I'd say, as political leaders, as people that are champions for our communities, it's more important now that we work together. I'm sure many of you work with the townships, work with the cities that are near you. I want to make sure that our communities, our First Nation communities, are included in that. Our visions are the same. There are some many unique challenges that our communities face, but we want prosperity. We want to be able to continue to provide for our people in our nations, whether it be in Northern Ontario, center of Ontario, or here in Eastern Ontario. Housing continues to be one of those challenges, and the challenge is there's an infrastructure gap. And I know that two of the things that was talked about from your executive here at the AMO was about housing and infrastructure. Those are important to us as well. Nationally, there's a $350 billion gap between on-reserve and off-reserve in infrastructure. In Ontario alone, $60 billion. That's what it will cost to bring the infrastructure gaps up in First Nation communities to what are those in the standards of all of non-Indigenous communities. We know that those challenges of unsafe houses, overcrowding homes, lead to other issues. They lead to social issues. They lead to violence. They lead to child welfare issues. And unfortunately, our communities are not immune from that either. And I can tell you that, a lot of First Nation communities in the north are moving into city centers. They're moving into towns. They're moving into the cities, sometimes not because they want to, because they have to. And that's to access services, to be able to provide for their families. And so as your communities, as your cities, your municipalities develop strategies around homelessness, develop strategies around housing, and develop social strategies, it's important that First Nations voices are included in that as well. And so that as you continue to advance, address those challenges, but also seize upon those opportunities. We know there are grim stories, whether it be coast to coast, in the north, in the south. Our challenges are great, but the opportunities are great as well. I had an opportunity to go into Neskantaga a couple weeks ago, a northern community that's take a very small plane to fly in an hour north. This community has had a boil water advisory for 29 years. 29 years. Ontario has the most boil water advisories across Canada. But I can tell you that those children there, you would never know that they had overcrowding. You would never know this. They have children who were born with having to boil the water, still continue to have to boil the water. And there's a likelihood that they'll grow into adults and still continue to face that challenge. But as we look, they're happy. They're happy in their community. They're happy in their homelands. Canada right now is at the cusp of a historical settlement between First Nations and the federal government, closing the gap between on-reserve and off-reserve around child welfare. This will forge forward revolution and change for the child welfare system. But I can tell you that it will be a long road, and it's where we look at partnerships with our municipal partners, partnerships with governments, and partnerships with organizations such as AMO to help continue to forge forward and build a better region. One of my roles that I have as the Ontario Regional Chief is to represent the chiefs in Ontario at the national level, and that is at the AFN. And I always go there and remind all of the other regions that Ontario is a very vast region. There's a lot of great things happening in Ontario. And I remind them that we're a very diverse region, whether it be the 133 First Nations in this region or the 444 municipalities that exist in this region. But we are strong. Indigenous people continue to advance and are resilient. But we need to continue to support one another because as we've heard the colonists before, there are some real political turmoils happening. And those things affect you, they affect us as much as the next person. I can tell you that my community of Akwesasne, which is an international border community that's dissected by Canada, United States, Ontario, and Quebec, that when I was there as a community leader, I governed the Canadian portion. Only 4 years ago when there was a president that basically governed and made policy decisions by tweets, had a lot of impact in my community. And that was by immigration, by the people flowing across the border and people wanting to get out of the United States because they didn't know the uncertainty. And so while we may think that there's no bearing on First Nation communities from the United States, there's a lot. And that makes a big difference for our people. One of the other areas that I wanted to just speak briefly on was about environmental protection. Our people have lived on the land since time immemorial, and the most sacred, important thing to us, other than our children, is having clean drinking water, preserving the natural beauties that we have. And as I mentioned, I spent some time in the north, and I have been there previously. It is beautiful up there. There's lots of opportunity, but there's also lots of risks. And this is why we call upon all of the elected officials in the room to continue to work with First Nations, the first peoples of this land who have inherent and treaty rights on those lands. You can read the media and hear that people are blocking roads or stopping development. There's a reason why that's happening. And it's important that you form those relationships, to have a working relationship and understand why that's happening, but also a pathway forward. In an era of truth and reconciliation, those are not only words, but it's met by actions. It's met by understanding and respect of the people in which we're here in these territorial lands before each and every one of us. And so at the Chiefs of Ontario, we continue to advance a number of files around source water protection, the environment, and mining is a file that is important to our people as well. And because Ontario is so diverse, our positions are not the same depending on where we are, whether it be in central Ontario, northern Ontario, or western Ontario. But I can tell you that each and every community of the 133 communities in Ontario, they want nothing more to ensure that their community are safe, has prosperity, jobs, and safe drinking water, and sound and infrastructure that will be there for the generations to come. The same thing that each and every one of you want for your communities. And so as we continue to move forward under my mandate as the Ontario Regional Chief, we'll continue to advance and forge relationships, encourage our First Nation leadership across Ontario to work with our municipal partners, and we will continue to support them in any way that we can. Because we know that as we continue to move forward as a society, there are more difficulties coming, especially around the economy, the cost of living, and the environment. The city of Toronto just flooded here. We had an advisory here in Ottawa not yesterday about large rains. Like this is new, but this is going to continue. And those impacts have great impacts on our communities in the north. Forest fires, our winter roads are no longer the same. And this is why it's extremely important that we continue to work together, advance our policies and priorities together so that we can serve our nations, our communities, and our people in which I was elected to represent. The last area that I'd like to briefly touch upon is the heritage and burials. And there's a lot of sites across this region in which we have where there are graves of our people or artifacts that have been found. And there are varying situations where there are not enough collaboration happening between developers or municipalities around this. And we want to ensure that we're working together on that. Because imagine a developer going into one of your community grave sites and just destroying that and not doing anything about it. And then legislation not being there to protect it or hold them accountable. Or a farmer who finds some sort of burial in his field and wants to do the right thing, but is required to spend $400,000 on an assessment. There needs to be some action taken to ensure that the realities on the ground are protecting our most sacred, your most sacred, and that is those that have come before us. So in closing, I want to thank you for the opportunity to welcome you to speak a little bit about who the Chiefs of Ontario is, who Abram Benedict is. I look forward to the next 3 days here at AMO. And again, I can tell you that every community across Ontario, the 130 communities that I represent, is here and willing to help continue to advance this beautiful region that we have as Ontario. and to bring prosperity to our communities, whether it be in central, northern, or southern Ontario. So, Yamago Miigwech to all of you, and I hope you have a wonderful 3 days. So, yeah.